Tonight you will step into the shadows of an abandoned fairground where silence hides voices and forgotten rides conceal something that should have never been found. Stay until the end, if you dare. The fair arrived with bright music and tired lights, their glow trembling against the dark sky. At the far end of the game aisle, a lonely stall stood silent, its glass case fogged from within. Inside rested an old doll with a faded red dress, lace frayed, and glass eyes that seemed wet, as if they had been crying. The showman called no one. He simply waited, still as the shadows. As I passed, I felt a pull in my stomach, not curiosity, but recognition, a strange certainty, as if she already knew me. I stopped in front of the stall, drawn by something I couldn't name. The showman's skin looked waxy under the faint bulb above him, his smile too still, too wide, as if carved into his face. Without speaking, he reached under the counter and placed the doll in my hands. Her weight was unnatural, heavy and cold like stone left in the rain. Leaning so close I could smell the damp fabric of his coat, he whispered, breath warm and damp against my ear, "Never leave her alone." The words clung to me like smoke, curling in my mind as I walked away into the fair's noise. That night I left the doll on a chair in my room. The house felt unusually still, the air heavier than usual. Around midnight, a faint scraping sound woke me. It came from the corner. The doll's head, once facing forward, was now turned toward me. Her glass eyes reflected the sliver of moonlight cutting through the curtains. I froze, listening. The scraping came again, slow, deliberate, as her tiny porcelain hand shifted along the wooden armrest. I told myself it was my imagination, a dream half remembered. I reached for the doll, meaning to turn her back. Her porcelain felt colder than before, almost damp. As my fingers brushed her cheek, I heard a tiny sound, like a breath escaping from inside the hollow shell. My heart pounded. I placed her back, this time facing the wall. But as I turned toward my bed, I caught the faintest giggle, soft and high, lingering in the shadows. I lay back in bed, convincing myself I was being foolish, that it was only my mind playing tricks. The shadows on the walls swayed with the movement of the curtains, but then one shadow didn't sway. It stood frozen, stretched long along the floor, small and unmistakably shaped like the doll. Slowly, the shadow's head began to turn toward me, impossibly slow, even though the real doll still faced the wall. My throat tightened, my skin prickling, every instinct screaming not to move, not even to breathe. I forced myself to glance at the wall, hoping to prove it was all in my head, but the shadow was gone. My eyes darted to the chair. The doll was no longer sitting upright. She leaned slightly forward as if listening. Her tiny porcelain fingers clutched the armrest tighter than before. A low creak echoed through the room, and the chair's leg scraped the floor, moving just enough to close the gap between us. My pulse thundered in my ears. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, my breath shallow. The air felt heavier, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then, from the corner, the faintest sound, a slow, deliberate tapping, came from inside the doll. Each tap echoed in my skull, steady and patient. My eyes eyes locked on her motionless form, yet the sound grew louder, closer, until it felt as though it was coming from just beneath my bed. Summoning all courage, I leaned over the side of the bed to peek underneath. The space was empty, no dust, no boxes, nothing. My gaze flicked back to the chair and froze. The doll was gone. In her place lay a small scrap of faded red fabric, torn and frayed. A cold breeze brushed my neck, though the window was shut tight. Somewhere behind me, on the floorboards, came the creak of a tiny footstep. I told myself it was my imagination, a dream half remembered. I reached for the doll, meaning to turn her back. Her porcelain felt colder than before, almost damp. As my fingers brushed her cheek, I heard a tiny sound, like a breath escaping from inside the hollow shell. My heart pounded. I placed her back, this time facing the wall. But as I turned toward my bed, I caught the faintest giggle, soft and high, lingering in the shadows. My breath caught as the second step faded. The silence that followed was heavier than before, pressing against my ears. I dared not move, yet my eyes tracked the doorway, waiting for movement. A faint giggle, childlike but warped, slipped through the air. It came from the hallway, curling around me like cold smoke. The shadows writhed, retreating toward the door as if summoned, leaving the room's corners darker, deeper, and impossibly still. I rose from the bed, legs trembling, each step toward the door a battle against my own fear. The wooden floor creaked beneath my weight, yet the sound felt swallowed by the darkness. At the doorway, the air turned icy, stinging my skin. That's when I saw it, two tiny barefoot prints on the hallway floor, wet and glistening as if fresh from rain. But outside there was no storm, only the moon peeking through a sky of still, heavy clouds. I followed the footprints, each one leading farther into the hallway, suffocating dark. The walls seemed narrow, closing in, their shadows pressing closer with every step. The air smelled damp like earth after rain, though the house was dry. Suddenly, the prints ended abruptly in the middle of the floor. No door, no corner, nothing, just empty wood. My chest tightened. Behind me, soft porcelain clinked faintly, as though something fragile had shifted in the dark. I spun toward the sound, my breath ragged, and froze. On the hallway floor, not far from me, the porcelain doll now sat upright. Her glassy eyes gleamed in the faint moonlight, unblinking, fixed directly on mine. One delicate hand, chipped at the fingers, clutched the same scrap of red fabric I had seen before. Slowly, impossibly, her head tilted to the side with a faint creak, as though acknowledging me, daring me to step closer into her gaze. I forced myself to step back, inch by inch, refusing to turn my back on her. My pulse hammered, every movement echoing louder than the silence. The doll remained motionless, yet her presence felt heavier, oppressive, as though the air itself bent around her. My heels struck the door frame, startling me. I longed to run, to scream, but fear pinned me still. In that unbearable pause, I realized I was no longer alone in my own house. The silence cracked with a brittle snap. Slowly, impossibly, the doll shifted, one porcelain arm twitched, then dragged against the floor, scraping with a sound that pierced the stillness. Her glassy eyes never left mine, unblinking, relentless. My throat tightened, yet no sound escaped. The red fabric in her hand slipped free, landing softly at her feet. A message, a lure. The air grew colder, pressing against my chest as if urging me to stay, to watch. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, whispering to myself that I could still escape. My eyes darted toward the exit, but the hallway stretched endlessly, twisting like a nightmare corridor. Every door I passed was locked, impossible to open. I told myself it was panic, illusion. But her porcelain gaze burned in my mind, bending reality itself. The harder I tried to run, the heavier my steps became, as if invisible strings pulled me back toward her. My vision blurred, colors bending, walls breathing like a living thing. I whispered my own name, desperate to anchor myself, but the sound echoed strangely as though spoken by someone else. The floor beneath me pulsed, warm and soft like flesh. I clawed at the walls, splinters cutting deep, yet even pain felt uncertain, distant. The doll's laughter echoed without lips inside my head. I no longer knew if I was awake or trapped inside her nightmare. Through the haze, a light appeared at the end of the corridor, faint, trembling but real. My chest swelled with desperate hope, and I forced my legs forward, every step shaking yet stronger than the last. The walls no longer bent, the floor no longer pulsed. For the first time, the nightmare seemed to retreat. I whispered, "I can make it." The glow widened into a door ajar, golden light spilling through. My trembling hand reached out, convinced salvation was near. I stumbled into the golden light, warmth washing over me like a promise kept. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of earth after rain. My lungs filled as though for the first time, and tears streamed down my face. Behind me, the corridor dissolved into shadow, swallowed by the dark. I whispered, "It's over. I'm free." My trembling legs gave way, and I collapsed on the grass, gazing up at a sky untouched by nightmares. At last I believed I had escaped. Days later, far from the abandoned fair, a small girl unwrapped a dusty box left on her doorstep. Inside, nestled in torn velvet, lay the porcelain doll, its cracked smile unchanged, its glassy eyes gleaming faintly. The girl giggled, whispering, "You're mine now." In that moment, the world around her seemed to darken, though she did not notice. The curse had chosen a new soul, and somewhere in the distance, faint laughter echoed, promising the nightmare was far from over. If you think the nightmare ended with him, you're wrong. The curse waits, always searching for its next soul. Perhaps as you turn off the screen tonight, you'll hear laughter in the dark. Would you survive if the doll chose you? If this story kept you on edge, don't face the darkness alone. Subscribe, like, and share so others can discover the curse of the doll before it finds them.